Welcome back to PHP Fundamentals. All right, let's continue on with our blog. So when we last left off, we had written the functionality, we created the table, and we fetched all of the rows and displayed them on the page. And here is where we were left off. All right, very simple at this point. So let's think about what the next step is. Well, if I go back to Chrome, right now, we don't have any links, so you're just viewing every single post. And as you can imagine, when there's 100 posts, this would be a massive file. It would take longer to load. What we really want is just to show excerpts and be able to click on these headings right here, which will take us to a different page. Okay, let's see how we could do that. I'm going to go back to Sublime Text. And now if we open up our view, the first thing is I want to get organized. So right now I have index.view.php, but when I have more views, it's all just in that root directory, and that's not a good idea. So I will switch into my sandbox, go into our blog, and I'm going to create a new directory called views, and I'm going to drag that in like so. Now all of my views will be contained within here. Next, I want to have a layout file, because of course we don't want to duplicate all of this HTML every single time. So within views, I'll create a new file called layout.php, and now I will paste in that snippet of HTML and add a doc type. Now, within here, I can load the necessary view. So I will echo the content that we passed to this layout file. That way, then we can come back here and we can get rid of all of this extra code so we don't have to duplicate ourselves. Now our view just has the content. All right, but if we go back and I load the page, we're going to get this new error. So let's figure that out. It's telling us it failed to open the stream because there's no such file. And of course that's the case. So I'm going to go back to index.php. And now, rather than including this view specifically, we're going to include views/layout.php, and I'm going to set the content for now equal to index. And good, now we're getting index, but of course that's not really what we want. What we want to do is populate this file with the view that we specify. So there's a couple ways to do this. Let's take our first stab at it. If I go back to layout.php, right now it's just trying to echo out some content, and all we're passing to it is the string index, nothing else. So this time, why don't we change it? We're going to change content to view path, and now I'm going to set that to views/index.view.php. Now if I go back to layout, within here, we can change it just a touch and include view path, like that. Now if I load it and we view the source, we do have our layout file, and now we are nesting the view. Now this isn't ideal, but it'll work for now for our first stab at how we could implement views. Let's continue on. Now I'm going to go back to our view file, and within here, instead of just displaying the heading, we're going to link to it. So I will set the anchor tag like so. Like so. Good. Now let's come back, and now we do have these links, but of course they don't go anywhere. So let's fix that. We need a new file, and its responsibility is to display a single post. So let's call it single.php right now, but this file is going to need to know what article that we're fetching from the database. So if we just call single.php, the web is stateless. It has no idea what we're referring to. So let's give it a hint. Well, what do we need? Well, let's come back and print the post so that you can see everything that we fetched from the database. If I reload it and I view the source, notice that for each one we have this unique ID. And now that's starting to be really helpful, isn't it? Now we have a way to identify every single post that we've created. So what if we did this? We're going to link to single.php, and then we'll tack on the ID in the query string. ID equals, and we'll echo post ID like so. Next, I'll go ahead and put the value on its own line, like so. That looks pretty good. And you know what? We can actually get rid of this. I forgot we're not concatenating anything. There we go. That looks right to me. So now we're linking to single.php, and we're passing through in the query string ID equals whatever the unique ID of the post is. So let's reload the page, and now if you look at the very bottom left when I hover over a link, you'll see this is linking to ID equals 3, ID equals 2, ID equals 1. And now if I click on that page, we are sent to single.php, which we haven't created yet, but now we do have a reference to the post that we're trying to retrieve. So let's finish this up. I'm going to create a new file, single.php, and now if we come back, we're going to see that we're starting to duplicate a lot of code. And this is something we need to think about when we're doing lots of stuff in every file. But for now, let's continue on this path. Let's just copy a bunch of this to begin. Paste it in. So once again, we are requiring functions. We're bringing in the blog. We're connecting to it. And now this time, rather than fetching all posts, let's see which one we want. If we come down, we want to use the query function right here. And then later we will create another helper function, but query is fine for now. So we can see we need to pass a query, the bindings, and the connection. So let's try this. I will run db query, and our query is going to be select star from posts where the ID equals, and we're going to use a named parameter there. Next, let's set up our binding. So we're going to bind the ID equal to the ID field in the query string, and that'll be okay for our first run. And then the third parameter is the connection that we already set up. Good, so now if I print our posts, let's see what we get. I'll reload the page, and we're getting a parse error on line 13, and that's because I forgot to close the bracket right there. One more time, and now if I view the source, good, we have fetched that one row. So let's go back and try this out again. If I click on PHP isn't too hard, now I want you to note that it is fetching the row for PHP isn't too hard. The same thing for my third post. So then at this point, we can come back to index.php and copy this. Once again, pay attention, we're having to copy and paste a lot. That doesn't seem scalable, does it? Nope. But again, let's continue on. So now this time we're going to load the single.view.php. Let's create that now. Single.view.php. And now within here, we're going to echo the post and its title. And let's see how far that gets us. I'll view the source, and now we're getting this undefined variable post. And that's because if I go back, we were storing that within a variable called posts. But that doesn't make sense. In this case, we really just want it to be singular because we're grabbing one post. Now if I run it, we're going to get another error, and that's because if you'll remember, when we run the query function, it's actually going to return an array of arrays. And we can confirm that by running php print r post. And if I view the source, you'll see it returns an array, and within it, it contains additional arrays for whatever was matched. So let's fix that. We could just do something like post 0 title. And now if I run it, yes, that'll work, but that's a little sloppy. Let's fix it. We'll do two things for now. First, I'm going to make sure that at most, only one record should be returned. So that's kind of a best practice. Just to be safe, I do want to limit it to one, even though it should always just be one. And next, for now, we're just going to grab the first item in that result set. And then we'll look at a different way in the future. So let's run it again, and now we're getting an error, and that's because this time we can get rid of that, and we should be able to access it as an array. Good. So now, div class equals body, and we will echo out the post body. Reload it, and there we go. So now if I do ID equals 1, we have my first post, ID equals 2, the second post, and ID equals 3 is the third post. But we also should have something that takes us back, shouldn't we? So let's add something right here, and we'll just say back. And that will simply take us back to the home page, like that. Okay, so let's run it. ID equals, let's say, 1. That looks good. If I click back, now we're back to our main page. Let's go to PHP isn't too hard. Now we are viewing the content for that, and we can go back. Good. But what if we try to view an ID that doesn't exist, like 10? Well, now we're not going to get anything, and that's not good either. And the problem is that we are running this, but we're not checking to see if we have anything returned. So let's change that. We'll say if post, and that just means if it's a truthy value, because otherwise it could be false or null. We'll say if post, then we'll say post equals that first item in the result set. Otherwise, we will redirect the user back to the home page like that. So let's try this. Run it, and now notice we're back. But it works normally. But if I do a wrong ID, Yep, it recognizes that nothing was returned, so it just immediately sends you back to the home page. We can also take this code right here and paste it in, like so. Good, so let's try it again. Single.php, ID equals 1. Now we're viewing that. If they enter maybe text. Good, now we're back to the home page. So that will do it for this lesson, but now there's two things I want you to think about. First, this is a very minimal project that we're working on, but already we're starting to see some complexity. So we're starting to see that index.php has all of this code, and then single, we're having to duplicate a lot. We're having to require a file, we're having to connect to a database. Wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to do that every single time? Absolutely. So we need to figure out how we can clean that up. And then secondly, when we ran single.php, we had this custom query. And what that does is it selects from the post where the ID equals what we specify. It gets a single post. And that seems like something in a blogging application that you would do a lot. So in those cases, it makes sense to abstract that away to its own function. So if you would like to work ahead, you could go back to functions.php and implement your new function, getById. So take a stab at that, see if you can figure it out on your own, and then that way in single.php, rather than running this, you could simply say db getById1 or getId, and then you have this reusable function that you can use across the application. So we will take a look at that in the next lesson, but I encourage you to work ahead and see if you can implement it on your own. I'll see you in the next lesson.